My wife's voice cut through our kitchen like a thrown plate. Apologize to my son right now, Mark, or we're getting a divorce. The words hit me so hard I felt them in my molars. Karen stood by the sink with her arms crossed, chin lifted, eyes bright, with that stubborn shine she got when she decided she was right, and the world could just adjust. Behind her, the under-cabinet lights threw a hard glow on the countertop clutter, high-V grocery bags, a half-open bag of pretzels, my pill organizer, sitting where it always sat like a quiet reminder I wasn't 25 anymore. And there was Dylan. Her son, 29 years old, still wearing his backward cap indoors like the house was a fraternity, leaning in the hallway with his shoulders against the doorframe. He wasn't even pretending to be sorry. He wore that little smirk like he already knew how this ended, like he'd watched Karen do this to people before. They were waiting for the old Mark, the one who swallowed it for peace, the one who fixed the leaky faucet and kept his mouth shut, the one who paid the bills and acted like the disrespect was just noise. The air got thick, not poetic, thick, real thick. The kind where you feel your shirt stick to your back and your lungs don't want to pull in a full breath. The refrigerator hummed. The wall clock over the microwave ticked like it had something to prove. I stared straight at my wife, the woman I'd married 8 years ago in a little church outside Cedar Falls, Iowa, where the pastor mispronounced my middle name, and we laughed about it later in the parking lot. The woman who used to hold my hand at the VFW fish fry when the line got long. The woman who once cried in my pickup because she was terrified her boy would never come home. Now she was yelling at me like I was a misbehaving employee. Mark, she snapped again louder. You heard me. I didn't look away. I didn't blink first. I just let the silence hang there until Dylan's smirk twitched like he was getting bored. In the back of my head, like a voice from a different life, I heard my dad, Harold Reynolds, born and raised in Grundy Center, the kind of man who could fix a combine with baling wire and shame. A man who begs today pays forever. My jaw tightened. I felt the ache in my left shoulder where arthritis had been chewing for years, like even my body was tired of holding things together. I glanced past Karen right at Dylan. He'd moved back into our house 3 months earlier, just for a little while after he got fired from his sales job in Des Moines. That's what Karen said anyway. Dylan's version changed depending on who was listening. Sometimes he was laid off. Sometimes it was toxic management. Once I heard him tell a buddy on speakerphone that he quit because he refused to sell his soul. What I knew was this: he came home with 2 duffel bags of PlayStation and an attitude big enough to fill our whole ranch-style house on Prairie Lakes Drive. And the longer he stayed, the smaller Karen became smaller in her courage, smaller in her honesty, until everything in our home started orbiting around Dylan's moods. If he slammed a door, dinner went quiet. If he rolled his eyes, Karen apologized to him like he was the wounded one. If he wanted cash for gas, she reached for her purse. Tonight had started like any other winter evening. Iowa cold pressing against the windows. The furnace running steady. Me still in my work boots smelling like machine oil and dust from the plant. I'd come home hoping for meatloaf and the local news. Instead, I walked into Dylan laughing at something on his phone while Karen was at the table with a stack of mail. One envelope was open. My name was on it. The logo of Black Hawk Credit Union stared up at me like an accusation. What's that? I asked. Karen didn't look at me, just statements. Dylan snorted. He's asking like he doesn't already know he's broke. I stopped. Excuse me. Dylan stood up slow like he was in a movie. I said you're acting like you don't know. You're always on my mom about money, like you're some hero because you pay the bills. Karen finally looked up then, and the look on her face wasn't apology. It was warning, like I was the problem for poking the bear she'd been feeding. Dylan, she said softly, but there was no bite to it. He leaned forward, hands on the table. You know what, Mark? I'm tired of you acting like you own everything. This isn't your little factory. This is my mom's house too. And you. He glanced at the framed photo in the hallway, my dad in a flannel shirt holding a crappie at George Wythe Lake. Dylan's lip curled. And your precious old man stopped waving his ghost around like a badge. He's not here. He's gone. And you're still just some maintenance guy. That's what did it. Not the insult to me. I've had men talk worse in the break room at 2 in the morning when a conveyor belt goes down. I can take a hit. But my dad was the kind of man who never raised his hand to anyone and still taught half the county what decency looked like. My dad didn't deserve Dylan's mouth. I stepped closer. Don't talk about my father. Dylan's eyes flashed. Or what? Karen shot up from the chair, palms out like she was breaking up a bar fight. Mark, stop. Please, just stop. He started it, I said, and I hated how my voice sounded tired, rough, older than I felt inside. Karen turned on me, and that's when she went for the nuclear button. Apologize to my son, she yelled, or we're getting a divorce. Like the last 8 years could be reduced to a switch she could flip to keep Dylan comfortable. And now here we were, kitchen lights, 2 bright hearts, too loud. Dylan smirking in the hallway like he'd already won. Karen's nostrils flared. Say it. Dylan folded his arms, still smiling. Go ahead, Mark. Tell me you're sorry. I looked at my wife again. I searched her face for the woman I married, for the one who once told me I just want a peaceful home, for the one who promised me we'd be partners. What I saw was someone standing between me and her son, choosing him again without even realizing she was doing it. I didn't shout. I didn't slam anything. I didn't give Dylan the satisfaction of seeing me crack. I just said the only true thing left in my mouth. I'm done here. Karen blinked like she hadn't processed the English language. What? I turned, walked to the coat rack and grabbed my old brown Carhartt jacket. My keys were on the hook. I took them. I picked up my duffel bag from the closet, half-packed from a work trip that never happened like the universe knew. Mark, Karen called, voice climbing, don't you dare just... I paused at the doorway and looked back one last time. Dylan's smirk faltered, just a hair, like he realized the game might be changing. I didn't give them another word. Outside, the cold slapped my face clean. The porch light made the snow sparkle like broken glass. My breath came out in a white cloud. I walked to my truck, climbed in, and shut the door. The cab smelled like stale coffee and motor oil, comforting in a way. I sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, staring at our living room window, where the curtains shifted as someone moved inside. Then my phone buzzed. Karen. I didn't answer. I put the truck in reverse and backed out, slow tires crunching on snow. As I drove toward town past the dark outlines of cornfields sleeping under winter, one thought settled in my chest like a stone, heavy, steady, sure. That night, sitting in my truck under the neon glow of the VFW parking lot, I realized something they hadn't. I did have somewhere to go. I just hadn't gone there yet. I didn't sleep much that night. Ray's couch was old and sunken in the middle, the kind that remembers every man who's ever crashed on it. The furnace clicked on and off with a wheeze that reminded me of my own knees on cold mornings. Somewhere outside, a semi downshifted on Highway 20, the sound stretching through the dark like a long sigh. I lay there staring at the ceiling fan, watching it wobble, thinking about the way Karen's face had hardened when she gave me that ultimatum. Not angry hard, certain hard, like she truly believed I'd fold. By 5 in the morning, I gave up on sleep and sat at Ray's kitchen table with a mug of coffee that tasted like it had been reheated too many times. The local news murmured on his small TV, snow totals, school delays. Nothing about a 57-year-old man who just walked out of his own house with a duffel bag and his pride bruised. Ray came in wearing a faded John Deere hoodie and rubbed his eyes. You look like hell, he said. Feel worse, I answered. He poured himself coffee and didn't push. That's what I appreciated about Ray. He knew when to let silence do the talking. My phone buzzed on the table. Karen. I didn't touch it. Another buzz, then another. Ray glanced at the phone, then back at me. You gonna answer that? Not yet. He nodded once, smart. By mid-morning, the messages started coming in. Karen, 7:42 a.m., we need to talk. Karen, 8:03 a.m., you embarrassed Dylan last night. Karen, 8:17 a.m., I can't believe you just walk out like that. There was no, are you okay? No, where did you go? Just accusations wrapped in concern, the way Karen had learned to do things when it came to her son. Around 10, a new message popped up. Karen, 10:11 a.m., if you don't come home, I'll have to talk to a lawyer. I stared at that one for a long time. Lawyer. The word sat heavy like a door slamming somewhere in the distance. Ray leaned against the counter. You hungry? Not really. Too bad. He slid a plate of eggs and toast in front of me anyway. Eat. Decisions are worse on an empty stomach. I forced a few bites down. My chest felt tight, not from hunger, but from something else, fear maybe. Or the slow realization that this wasn't just a fight. This was a line. While Ray rinsed dishes, my mind drifted back to a different time, a softer one. Karen and I hadn't always been like this. When we first got married, Dylan was 21 and living 3 states away. He'd left in a hurry after a blow-up with Karen that left her shaking on the couch, mascara streaked, convinced she'd lost him forever. I remembered that night clearly. Karen had sat in my truck in the Hy-Vee parking lot, gripping the seatbelt with both hands like it was the only thing holding her upright. "I failed him," she whispered. "I pushed too hard. He'll never come back." I'd reached over and taken her hand. "Kids come back," I said, "especially when they know there's still a place for them." A year later, Dylan did come back for Thanksgiving, then for Christmas. And when he finally moved home again, I was the one who said, "Let's give him a chance." I was the one who cleaned out the spare room. I was the one who told Karen he just needs time. That memory stung now, like pressing on a bruise you didn't know you had. By noon, I found myself holding my phone, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. "I'm sorry, let's talk." The words sat there, typed out, glowing softly on the screen. For a moment, I imagined driving back, apologizing, swallowing my pride for the sake of the marriage, sitting across from Dylan at the kitchen table while he smirked and pretended to forgive me. Peace at any price. My thumb hovered over send. Then Ray spoke, his voice casual but sharp enough to cut through my thoughts. "You know, my buddy Steve," he said. I looked up. "The guy from Cedar Rapids." "Yeah, same age as us. Wife gave him an ultimatum like that once. He apologized. Thought he was being the bigger man." Ray shook his head slowly. "She learned something that day." "What?" "That if she pushed hard enough, he'd cave. Took her 5 years to clean out his retirement and leave him with a rented room and a bad back." The room went quiet. I looked back at my phone. The words were still there. "I'm sorry, let's talk." In my head, my father's voice came back clear, as if he were sitting across from me at that table cap, pulled low hands wrapped around a mug. "A man who begs today pays forever." I exhaled long and slow. Then I deleted the message. The screen went blank. Ray didn't smile. He just nodded once, like he'd seen this moment before, and respected the weight of it. That afternoon, while Ray went out to run errands, I drove downtown to Black Hawk Credit Union. The building sat on the corner like it always had, brick, sturdy, unpretentious. The kind of place that remembered your name if you'd been there long enough. Inside, the heat hit me along with the smell of old carpet and fresh coffee. A young teller smiled politely. I asked to see someone about past refinancing documents. "Name?" she asked. "Mark Reynolds," I said. "Account ending in 482. She typed, glanced at the screen, and her eyebrows lifted just a touch. "One moment, Mr. Reynolds." I sat in a chair near the window, watching cars crawl past on icy streets. My hands rested on my knees, steady now. Not calm, but focused. A man in his 40s with wire-rimmed glasses came out and shook my hand. "Mark, haven't seen you in a while. I need copies of the refinancing paperwork from 3 years ago," I said. "The full packet." He nodded. "The ones from when your father passed?" "Yes." "That'll take a few minutes," he said. "You want coffee?" I declined and waited. As I sat there, something shifted inside me. Not anger, not even resolve. Clarity. Karen had always assumed I handled the boring stuff. Bills, paperwork, contracts. She signed where I pointed, trusted me to keep things running. And she'd never once asked what any of it meant. When the man returned with a folder thick enough to thump on the desk, I felt a strange calm settle in my chest. I didn't open it right away. I just rested my hand on the cover and thought about the way Karen had looked at me in the kitchen, so sure I had nowhere to go. They assumed I'd come crawling back to save my credit, my house, my marriage. They were wrong about one thing, and that one thing was going to cost them everything. I opened the folder in my truck, not inside the credit union. Some things deserve privacy. The paper smelled faintly of toner and old files the way official documents always do. I spread them across the passenger seat, smoothing the corners with my palm, like they might talk back if I handled them rough. There it was, the refinance paperwork from 3 years earlier, the notary stamp, the signatures, mine neat and steady. Karen's rushed and slanted like she'd been thinking about something else. I remembered that afternoon clearly now. Karen had been distracted. Dylan was calling again, angry about something, convinced the world was unfair. She'd skimmed the documents while standing at the counter, pen tapping. "Is this all standard?" she'd asked. Yeah, I said, just protection stuff. Fine, she said, already half turned away. You always handle this. That was true, I always did. Back then, I'd listened to a quiet man at the credit union, a gray-haired advisor, who'd known my father explain things slowly without drama. He talked about contingencies, about how second marriages sometimes got complicated, about how protecting assets wasn't about mistrust. It was about foresight. People don't plan to fall apart, he'd said. They just don't plan for when they do. At the time, I thought I was being careful, responsible. Now I realized I'd been building a door I never thought I'd walk through. The language was plain once you looked at it without fear. The house, the refinancing, the asset structure tied to accounts in my name, the protections that kicked in if shared funds were misused or if someone attempted to leverage property without proper authorization. Nothing sneaky, nothing illegal. Just thorough. I sat back in the truck and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. I wasn't trapped. I drove back to Ray's place and spent the rest of the afternoon reading everything twice. I made notes in the margins with a pen. Ray handed me the ink, scratching loud in the quiet room. I didn't feel clever. I felt sober. That night, Karen called again. I watched the phone buzz across the coffee table like it was alive. I didn't answer. Instead, I poured myself a glass of water and stood by the window. Snow fell slow and steady, covering tire tracks, like erasing evidence. For the first time since walking out, I felt something close to solid under my feet. The next morning, I made an appointment with a local family attorney, someone whose name I'd heard at the VFW more than once. Not a shark, just steady. The kind of man who explained things in terms you could take home and sleep on. We sat in his small office above a hardware store downtown. He listened more than he talked, which I appreciated. When I was done, he leaned back and folded his hands. You didn't set this up to hurt anyone, he said. You set it up to protect yourself. I nodded. Your wife, he continued, made assumptions. That seems to be the theme, I said. He almost smiled. By the time I left, the plan wasn't flashy. It wasn't revenge yet. It was just preparation. Quiet, legal, patient preparation. The way my dad used to do things. That afternoon, I checked my accounts. Everything was still intact. No alarms, no alerts, just numbers sitting where they had always sat. Then late that evening, my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Dylan's voice came through sharp and loud like he was pacing when he called. Hey, Mark, he said, dripping sarcasm. We need to talk. Right now. There's some kind of issue with the accounts. Mom's freaking out. So if this is some kind of stunt, you made your point. Click. I stared at the screen. Stunt. 10 minutes later, another voicemail. Same number, different tone. Okay, listen, Dylan said slower now. There's a misunderstanding. I was just trying to take care of a few things and suddenly the car doesn't work. That's not normal. You need to fix this. I didn't move. An hour after that, my phone buzzed again. Karen. This time I answered. Mark, her voice was tight, controlled. Something's wrong with the account. I leaned back in Ray's recliner and looked at the ceiling. What kind of wrong? It's frozen, she said. Dylan was trying to pay for something and it declined. Pay for what? There was a pause. A boat, she said quietly. A used fishing boat. He said it was a good deal. I closed my eyes. A fishing boat, of course it was. And you didn't think to ask. I said, Mark, please, she snapped, then softened. This isn't the time. The bank called. They said they needed your authorization. I let the silence stretch. Not to punish her, to let the truth breathe. I didn't authorize anything I said. Well, you need to, she replied, frustration creeping in. This is ridiculous. We can't have accounts just locking up like this. Karen, I said, keeping my voice level. Your son tried to use shared funds without my consent. He lives here, she said. He's family. So am I said. Another pause, this one heavier. We'll talk about this when you come home, she said, the old certainty creeping back in. I'm not coming home, I replied. The line went dead. Over the next 2 days, the calls came in waves. Dylan angry, then Dylan pleading, then Dylan pretending to be reasonable. Karen left messages too. The first was clipped and demanding. The second was tight with worry. By the third day, her voice cracked in a way I hadn't heard in years. Mark, she whispered into the phone. I don't understand what's happening. Please call me. I listened to each one once. Then I put the phone face down. I wasn't enjoying this. That surprised me. What I felt was something closer to relief. The chaos they'd lived with, the shouting, the entitlement, the assumptions had finally run into something solid. Not me yelling, not me threatening. Paper. Time. Truth. On the third evening, as the sun dropped behind the snow-covered roofs, I picked up my phone and typed a single message. "We'll talk, publicly." I sent it before I could second-guess myself. As the screen dimmed, I thought about how strange it was that all of this years of tension, months of resentment, one shouted ultimatum was coming down to paperwork and patience. I wasn't going to fight. I wasn't going to beg. I was just going to let the truth speak for itself. In front of everyone who mattered. The first voicemail came in at 7:18 the next morning. I was sitting at Ray's kitchen table again, the same chipped mug in my hands, the same gray Iowa sky pressing against the window. I let the phone ring itself quiet and waited for the notification. New voicemail. I didn't listen right away. I finished my coffee first. That felt important. When I finally pressed play, Dylan's voice exploded out of the speaker. "Mark, what the hell is wrong with you?" he snapped. I could hear wind in the background like he was pacing outside. "You think you can just lock us out of our own money? That card got declined in front of people? Do you have any idea how that made me look?" I pictured it without trying. Dylan standing in some marina office or sporting goods store, credit card sliding back across the counter, the clerk giving him that polite, embarrassed smile. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "You're pulling some kind of power move," Dylan continued. "You always do this. You act calm like you're the smartest guy in the room, but you're just being petty. Mom's losing her mind over here. So congratulations, you win. Now fix it." The message cut off hard. I set the phone down and stared at the tabletop, the wood grain worn smooth by decades of use. I thought about the number of times Dylan had said, "Fix it in my house," when the Wi-Fi went down, when his car wouldn't start, when life didn't hand him what he thought he deserved. The second voicemail came less than an hour later. Same number, different voice. "Okay," Dylan said, slower this time, almost careful. "Look, maybe I came in hot earlier. That's on me. This got blown out of proportion." I could hear him breathing like he was choosing his words. "We can work this out. You don't need to make it a whole thing. Just unlock the account and we'll talk. I'll even apologize if that's what you want." There it was, the offer, the fake humility. I deleted the message without replying. By noon, the calls stopped coming from Dylan. That's when Karen started. Her first voicemail was clipped businesslike. "Mark, the credit union needs you to call them," she said. "They won't release anything without your authorization. This is getting serious." The second came 5 hours later. "Mark," she said, and the edge was gone, now replaced with strain. "Please, we need to sit down and talk." Dylan didn't mean for things to go this far. By the third day, her voice barely sounded like her own. "Mark," she whispered, "I don't know what to do. He keeps asking me what's happening and I don't have answers. Please call me." That one sat with me longer than the rest. I remembered Karen as she used to be laughing at dumb commercials, fussing over the garden in the spring, proud of the way I kept things running. I remembered her fear too, the way she clung to Dylan like if she let go, he'd disappear forever. Fear can make good people do bad math. On the afternoon of the third day, Ray came home early and found me sitting on the porch steps, coat pulled tight, phone in my hand. "They still at it?" he asked. "Worse," I said. He sat beside me, the wood creaking under our combined weight. "You okay?" I thought about it. "I think so," I said. "Just tired." Ray nodded. "That's normal. You're doing something hard." I looked out at the street. A plow rumbled past, throwing snow into neat white walls along the curb. Everything looked clean and sharp, like the town had been reset overnight. That evening, I drove past my old house without slowing down. The porch light was on. Karen's car was in the driveway. Dylan's too. I didn't feel the pull I expected. No urge to turn in. No instinct to fix things. Instead, I felt distance, clean, clear distance. Back at Ray's place, I listened to Karen's last voicemail one more time. The one where her voice cracked. I wasn't enjoying this. That mattered to me. This wasn't about punishing her. It was about ending something that had been rotting for a long time. I typed one message, just one. "We'll talk, publicly." I stared at it for a second, then hit send. The phone went silent. That night, lying on the couch, I didn't hear my father's voice for once. I didn't hear Karen yelling. I didn't hear Dylan sneering. What I felt was something steadier than anger. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to fight. I was just going to let the truth speak for itself. In front of everyone who mattered. The Black Hawk County Courthouse sits on a quiet block downtown, all limestone, and narrow steps worn smooth by 100 years of boots. I'd driven past it 1,000 times without ever thinking I'd walk through those doors for my own marriage. That morning, the parking lot was already half full when I arrived. Pickup trucks, sedans with faded dealer stickers, a couple of cars I recognized from the plant. In a town this size, news didn't travel fast. It traveled sideways, slipping through conversations at gas pumps and church hallways until everyone knew just enough to be curious. Inside, the air smelled faintly of paper, old wood, and winter coats drying off. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead. I took a seat on a hard bench and folded my hands in my lap, noticing how steady they were. Karen arrived 10 minutes later. She wore a navy coat I'd bought her for Christmas 2 years earlier. Her hair was done carefully, makeup neat but rushed. She looked around the room like she was trying to count allies. Dylan came in right behind her, overdressed for a courthouse on a weekday morning. Clean jacket, new boots, jaw tight. He scanned the room until his eyes landed on me. For a split second, I saw uncertainty flash across his face. Then it hardened. The room filled in quietly. A representative from the credit union sat a few rows back. My attorney nodded at me, once calm as ever. A couple of people from town whispered near the wall, pretending not to stare. Karen took her seat without looking at me. When the proceedings began, there was no drama at first, just names, dates, calm voices laying out facts the way facts prefer to be laid out, slowly without emotion. The paperwork came out, the refinance documents, the signatures, the asset structure that Karen had barely glanced at years earlier, the timeline of attempted transactions, the flagged account activity. Dylan shifted in his chair. When the credit union representative spoke, it was matter of fact. No accusation, no theatrics, just explanation. Unauthorized attempts to access shared funds, she said, repeated within a short period. That triggered an automatic review. Karen's head snapped up. "We didn't do anything wrong," she said. The mediator held up a hand. "Mrs. Reynolds, please." Dylan leaned forward. "This is insane," he muttered. "This is just money." That was when the room went still. The mediator looked at him over her glasses. Money becomes serious when people assume it isn't. The next part came quickly after that. The house. Karen's shoulders sagged as the language was explained in plain terms. Not legal jargon, just reality. The house wasn't something she could leverage or promise or use as collateral without Mark's authorization. It never had been. Dylan scoffed. "That's not fair." I didn't look at him. The mediator turned to Karen. "Mrs. Reynolds, did you read these documents when you signed them?" Karen opened her mouth, closed it. "I trusted him," she said quietly. I finally spoke. "And I trusted you," I said. My voice carried farther than I expected. "To be my partner." Dylan stood up then. "You planned this," he snapped, pointing at me. "You set this up so you could control everything." A bailiff stepped forward. "Sir, sit down." Dylan didn't. "I lost my job," he went on, voice rising. "I needed help. And you." "Sit down," the bailiff said again, louder. Dylan dropped back into his chair, face flushed, chest heaving. The room buzzed with the sound of held breath. Karen stared at the table in front of her like it might open up and swallow her whole. When the decision came, it wasn't delivered like a hammer. It didn't need to be. The mediator spoke calmly, clearly. The assets would remain protected. The accounts would stay frozen pending proper separation. Legal fees would be divided with additional responsibility assigned where financial misuse had occurred. Karen's eyes lifted to mine then. "I didn't know it would come to this," she whispered. I was scared of losing him again. The room went quiet. I stood slowly. "You lost me," I said, not raising my voice, "the day you made me choose." I turned to Dylan. "I apologized years ago for not being your father," I said. "Now you owe me a lot more than an apology." He had nothing to say. When it was over, people filed out in small groups murmuring. The credit union rep shook my hand. Ray clapped me once on the shoulder and grinned like he'd just watched a fair fight and the way it should. Karen lingered near the door. "Mark," she said. I looked at her. I hope you find peace, I said. Then I walked past her out into the cold Iowa air and felt something lift off my chest that I'd been carrying longer than I realized. The apartment was quiet in a way my old house never had been. No TV murmuring in the background, no doors slamming, no tension humming under the floorboards like bad wiring. Just the soft tick of the wall clock and the steady hum of the refrigerator doing its job without complaint. I moved in 3 weeks after the courthouse, a small one-bedroom on the edge of town not far from the river trail. Nothing fancy. Beige walls, brown carpet, a balcony just big enough for a folding chair and a cup of coffee. The kind of place you choose when you're done trying to impress anyone. The first night there, I sat on the floor with my back against the couch and ate a sandwich straight from the wrapper. Turkey, mustard, simple. And for the first time in a long while, my chest didn't feel tight. Work went on like it always had. The plant still smelled like oil and warm metal. Machines still broke at the worst possible times. Younger guys still complained about their shifts, and older guys still pretended not to hear them. A few people asked questions. Word had gotten around the way it does in a town like ours. Everything okay at home, Mark? I nodded. Yeah, getting there. That was enough. On Friday nights, I started stopping by the VFW again. Same long tables, same bad jokes, same fish fry that somehow tasted better the older you got. Ray always saved me a seat. One evening, he slid a beer across the table and said, "You smiling more." I hadn't noticed, but he was right. Karen texted once about a month after the hearing. "I hope you're well." I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't hate her. That surprised me too. I typed back one sentence. "I hope you find peace." And that was it. I heard through town that Dylan had moved out not long after. Some cousin in Illinois, maybe. Another fresh start. I wished him luck, honestly. The world is hard enough without teaching it the wrong lessons. One Saturday morning, Ray and I drove out to George Wythe Lake with 2 cheap fishing poles and a thermos of coffee. The water was calm, the kind of flat gray that looks like it's thinking about something important. We didn't catch much. Didn't matter. At one point, Ray leaned back in his chair and said, "You ever regret it?" I thought about the kitchen, the ultimatum, the smirk, the way my stomach had dropped when Karen said the word divorce like it was a weapon. I thought about the couch at Ray's place, the phone in my hand with an apology typed and deleted, the courthouse bench under my palms. "No," I said finally. "I regret staying quiet for as long as I did." Ray nodded. "That tracks." Driving home that afternoon, windows cracked, sun low over the fields, my dad's voice came back one last time. "A man who begs today pays forever." I understood it differently now. It wasn't about pride. It wasn't about winning. It was about knowing when your own voice matters more than keeping the peace at any cost. I didn't win. I simply refused to lose myself. Those 3 words I spoke in my kitchen, "I'm done here," weren't meant to punish anyone. They were meant to remind me that I still had a say in my own life. And that turned out to be enough. If this story felt familiar, if you've ever swallowed your words just to keep things calm or wondered how much of yourself you've given away to avoid conflict, I hope it reminds you of something simple and important. Peace isn't something you beg for. It's something you choose. If this story gave you something to think about, consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories about standing up quietly, legally, and with dignity, make sure you're subscribed. Thanks for listening.